The Book of Mormon teaches us that when we are brought before the judgment bar of God, our words will condemn us and our thoughts will also condemn us. Let us recognize profanity and vulgarity for what they are. They are sins that separate us from God and cripple our spiritual defenses by causing the Holy Ghost to withdraw from us. A speaker who mouths profanity or vulgarity to punctuate or emphasize speech confesses inadequacy in his or her own language skills. Properly used, modern languages require no such artificial boosters. A speaker who employs profanity or vulgarity to catch someone's attention with shock effect engages in a babyish device that is inexcusable as juvenile or adult behavior. Such language is morally bankrupt. It is also progressively self-defeating, since shock diminishes with familiarity, and the user can only maintain its effect by escalating its excess. Members of the church, young or old, should never allow profane or vulgar words to pass their lips. The language we use projects the images of our hearts, and our hearts should be pure.
Is that the best you can do?
Well, bloody bugger to you, you beastly bastard.
Oh, a public school prig could do better than that.
Shit. Shit, 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 shit.
Yes.
Shit.
Defecation flows trippingly from the tongue.
Because I'm angry.
Do you know the F word?
Fornication.
Oh, Bertie.
Fuck. 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 Fucking fuck. Fuck. Fucking bugger. Bugger, bugger, buggity, 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 fuck, fuck, ass.
Yes.
Balls, balls, fucking
You see,
shit,
not a
shit,
hesitation.
Fuck, and willy, shit, and fuck, and tits.
Dad? What's going on?
Sorry.
Just finish your homework. Well, that's a side of you we don't get to see all that often.
No, we're not supposed to, really.
This is Infants on Thrones. The philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the core.
Hey there, listeners. Jake here. In the results of our listener feedback survey, one topic that stood out to me as being particularly divisive was swearing on the podcast. And I get that. On one hand, the way that people like Elder Oaks demonize swearing within Mormonism makes the idea of embracing taboo words into your vocabulary kind of a natural step in the process of renegotiating one's relationship with the faith. But on the other, the Elder Oaks of this world don't just pull that stuff out of their bottoms. Their opinions are a reflection of the larger culture that has deemed certain language as vulgar or crass, and because of that cultural stigma, people's aversion to swearing often runs as deep or deeper than whether or not they believe the church is true. Which really begs a lot of questions about swearing as a post-Mormon. Like, how do you restructure your opinion of swearing outside of Mormonism? What's the morality of swearing or not swearing? Is there a morality of swearing or not swearing? How do you swear and still be sensitive to the non-swearers out there? And how do you deal with swearing as a parent? So, with me today I have Bob, our resident swearer-in-chief, Randy, who had some audio issues along the way, and Glenn, who joined in the conversation a little bit later on to discuss the topic, along with some relevant audio clips spliced in. And to top it all off, we've created a short, fun little survey to gauge our listeners, your views on swearing. So either right now, before you get into the panel discussion, or after you finish the episode, I'd encourage you to find this episode on our website, infantsonthrones.com, click on the survey link, and give it a shot. Oh, did I mention that this is going to be explicit? Yeah, it's going to be explicit. Hang on. What I really want to get into is, what did swearing mean to you as a Mormon, and what was your relationship with it? So I kind of want to go, I don't know who wants to start. Bob, why don't you start?
So, yeah, I grew up in a conservative household, growing up Mormon, and swearing was a big no-no, and we called it swearing. Cursing seemed like something your grandpa would do. It could almost be like, "Dag nabbit," and that's practically a curse. It was always something we made fun of. But swearing was the real stuff, and there was kind of a hierarchy, and it's kind of mirrored after the movie rating system, if you think about it.
Right.
you got your PG swear words, which are, and even now you can say some of these contextually in G movies. Speaking of being too pedantic, that's probably too much information. But like your hells and damns, depending on the context,
Right.
they're not that bad. You read them in the Bible, that sort of thing. But then Mormons will I still remember doing the whole HE double hockey sticks sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Which is kind of hilarious. And talking about hell as a place is totally fine and normal, but then if you say what the hell, it's like a whole other level of badness for some reason.
Right, exactly. Uh-huh.
So hell and damn are like the light swear words that as you, at least for me, as I started to disaffect or disassociate from the church, those were the first ones to, even as an active member, there's a period as a quote unquote liberal Mormon where you embrace the hells and damns as if it's like a badge of honor, like you're making a stance like, swearing isn't as bad as it needs to be. I'm not like totally full of myself and subscribe to the conservative way of life 100%. See?
I'm not a damn prude. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
But then somebody says fuck and you're like, and it gives you this like jitter, like,
right.
Which is kind of ironic. So after hells and damns, I'd probably go with, I think ass and bitch are kind of in the same category. A little worse, but both still.
Order?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, ass not quite as bad as bitch. Kind of the tier 2. I guess if tier 1 is light, tier 2 and the higher number gets worse or whatever. I'm making it up on the fly. So those, because you can have different iterations, and I remember saying asshole was a lot worse than saying ass, because it felt like really like you're visualizing something that's not good either.
Right.
External anal sphincter.
Yeah, exactly. And same goes with like if you talk about bitch in one sense, but then if you say son of a bitch, then like son of a bitch is like worse somehow because it's referencing. I don't
know, because if you call a girl a bitch, I think to me that would have been way worse than saying son of a bitch in an exclamation. Even
That's
as a
true.
Mormon, I'm talking about as a Mormon, because one is actually abusive, and the other one is just an exclamation.
That's a fair point. I guess I don't know that I ever really thought of calling anyone a bitch like a woman. I always thought of bitch as like, and then there's like these spin-off, like that's bitchin'. If you remember the whole bitchin' thing, and I was like, is that a swear word?
Right.
I used to love to say that because it was like I could say that, but it's not really a cuss word because it's like a hip slang word.
Exactly. Right. It's weird how that happened. And bastard is another one that I forgot to mention. That's sort of sandwiched in between damn and hell and ass and bitch. I don't think it's quite as bad, but in some circles, in mine, it was still kind of a bad word. But then you like graduate from ass and bitch to shit. And then this is where the other blasphemy ones come in, which I put in the same category as shit. And what I'm referring to is when somebody says, Jesus Christ! Like, that was a pretty big deal growing up. Like, swearing with Jesus' name is basically saying the same thing as holy shit, or at least they're on par and they're right below, the mother of them all, which is the F-bomb.
Where do you put God? Where do you put God damn it?
I want to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
dag nabbit, and basically is a euphemism for God damn it.
Right.
Yeah. And God damn it is a weird one because I glossed over quickly the fact that oh my God is something that Mormons specifically avoid like the plague. But
oh my gosh, OMG, OM gosh.
Exactly. At the same time as like being defined practically like in a word of wisdom sort of way as to never swearing with the word God, Mormons still are pretty self-aware that it's not a big deal. Like the oh my God is it's right in there with the hell and damn category. But then if you say God damn it and you like combine the two together, then there's some sort of magic power transitive thing that happens that makes it so they like skip a level of awfulness. And God damn it is I'd say it's just shy of shit in Jesus Christ, but it's much worse than damn and hell, and even more so it's worse off using that than ass or bitch. But this is like the world according to how Bob grew up. So I don't know if you guys want to confirm or nuance it a little bit more.
Well, for me, the ones involved, like Jesus Christ and God damn it and oh my God, were worse than fuck. And actually, my wife, to this day, even though we swear all the time, she won't say God damn it, and she won't say Jesus Christ, and she won't say oh my God. She'll say every other word. I mean,
okay,
every other word except for those. So those are ones that in my experience, had such a visceral connection, even more so than the other swear words. It was like supercharged. But that was, I don't know, that was my experience.
But even you didn't differentiate between oh my God and Jesus Christ. Like oh my God felt so pervasive. Like it's just all around you. You get numb to it. And I remember part of this might be that when I was on my mission and just recognizing when you're trying to convert people in another language, that they're saying God all the time, and it's just a way of exclaiming themselves. They don't even think of it as a swear word. And I think it's the same in the U.S. and a lot of places. It's like nobody considers it, or very few people consider it swearing unless they're consciously religious in that very specific way. But even, ironically, other Christians and religious people like gloss over this rule that Mormons have really wholeheartedly embraced.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like another thing that's really common is God help us. And I don't think Mormons would even feel comfortable saying, God help us. You know,
right.
And really, that's just kind of like...
Or God knows where.
That's God knows where, or only God knows.
Right.
And Mormons wouldn't say that. Like, you just wouldn't say that, which is kind of weird to me because, you know, that's basically a mini prayer to them. Like, oh my God, God help us, only God knows, to like your average run-of-the-mill Christian, in, you know, from what I know and my experience, it is not offensive to them in any way. But Mormons have taken this do not use the Lord's name in vain to the extreme. Yeah,
that the Lord's name in vain is definitely that's one that Mormons have really grasped onto. So, Bob, did you swear at all, like in high school? Was there a rebellious stage where, away from your parents, you're in high school and you start saying fuck or whatever, you know?
No, never. I remember consciously, this is semi-embarrassing, but it's kind of cute in its own little way, I guess. But I remember there was one time in high school when I was frustrated and I let out like, damn it, or it was either a damn it or a what the hell. It was like one of these, and I felt so bad about it, and I rarely, I lost my temper or I'd get frustrated like any kid, but I didn't swear, especially for anybody to ever hear or for it to be like documented. It's sort of like, you know, if you asked me at the right stage of my life, I never masturbated or looked at porn either. Or I tried to block it out of my mind and, maybe I did once. But with swearing, it's kind of even more not spirit of the law, but letter of the law. I don't know, for whatever reason, it was a big deal for me. Like I rarely let it out, like a handful of times, counting on one hand. And it wasn't until after my mission, and by the way, the mission opened up like all sorts of replacements that I hadn't, you know, been as familiar with, like the fetch, or in my mission, people like to say instead of damn, they'd be like damages or bastage instead of bastard, or
bastage, by the way, is a ripoff of Johnny Dangerously.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So is Fargan Icehole.
And there's Judas Priest and like, there's all these replacements, but it really wasn't until I went through the liberal stage where I started getting comfortable with dams and hells, and then when I was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, then shit started to come into the equation, and then like I'd say it's pretty much only after I wasn't beholden to the structure that is the church, where you know they were ruling over my destiny after this life. That's like when I let go with the fucks.
Right. Who let the fucks out?
Yeah, exactly.
I think what's part of that is that I think religious people, fundamentalists, Mormons fall into that category, actually kind of ascribe a metaphysical attribute to words where they think that they actually corrupt your soul, like your very soul. And I think that's why they flinch. So I think that once Bob and I, and Jake, you as well, once the metaphysics kind of sloughed away, we started to realize what these taboo words are. They're just cultural constructs. And so why shouldn't we use them? Because they feel good, in certain circumstances. And they're well used in certain circumstances. But the household I grew up in, my mom was so rigid and so strict. Like words that aren't even curse words, I was not allowed to say in my house. Words like sucks, because my mom thought that had a sexual connotation. What she didn't realize is that made me think about why I couldn't say sucks. Right. It made me think about people sucking on dicks.
Titties. Awesome. We don't discriminate suck-wise. Or titties.
We were not allowed to say the word stupid. And that one is probably better because that's really kind of an abusive word. And that's something I also want to get into, is the difference between very clean words that are very abusive and very what are considered dirty taboo words, which are absolutely not abusive. But that's the kind of household I grew up in, is I had to watch not just from cussing, but what words that were not cussing that were not allowed in my house.
Right. He who saith, Raka is in danger of hellfire, that type of thing, right? Thou fool, or whatever. Were you allowed to say thou fool?
I could not call anyone a fool. That was because that was in the scriptures. I couldn't call anyone a fool. Couldn't call him stupid. Couldn't say sucks.
But were you allowed to say retard and faggot?
No, I was not.
But were they even on the list? I just want to know if they're, because sometimes like those words for some reason get, at least me growing up, they like kind of got a pass for a little while. Not that my parents encouraged it, but they never, when they whipped out the list of like the subconscious. I don't know if they ever actually explicitly did this, but it was very clear that you can't say shit or even hell and damn. Don't say that around mom or dad. And you're probably not going to say retard or faggot, but like since those words weren't on the same list, like they back to your original point, Jake, I probably said those at some points when I was a lot younger, not thinking, like compartmentalizing, like they're not really swear words, even though they're kind of worse in some ways.
Right. Yeah, they are worse. And that's the irony there. To answer your question, I definitely could not say faggot because that was kind of a curse word where I grew up in California. But I don't think my mom would have flinched if I said retard, now that I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I should clarify, it's not like I was saying it willy-nilly. I knew that it was bad, but I just knew, especially before, there was a little phase of my life from when I was like 11 to 14 where I wasn't living in Utah, I was living in Virginia, and I had friends all around me that were saying retard and faggot like it was candy, passing out candy, and it was just hard not to assimilate and let it slip, and it just never registered with me that it was in the same league as swearing, because swearing, there was a hierarchy and a chart, and these other words, I just didn't know where to fit them.
All right, look, you're driving in your car, okay? And you're waiting to make a left at a traffic signal. The light turns yellow, should be your turn to go, but the traffic coming at you just keeps coming. And even when the light turns red, a guy in a BMW runs the red light so you can't make your left turn. What goes through your mind?
Fag.
So, Randy, did you go through kind of a similar arc as Bob, where you started swearing more when you started to disassociate yourself from the church or from traditional belief, or did they not happen at the same time for you?
Well, swearing has always been kind of a vice of mine. It's probably genetic. My dad's dad, my grandpa, worked, I'm borrowing something from Christmas Story, he worked in profanity like others worked in clay.
Right. Right.
And so my dad grew up in that era. My dad would let out son of a bitch and, damn it. He'd pepper out the very mild curse words here and there. I heard my mom cuss once in my whole life, and that's when the vacuum broke. And she said shit, and it like blew my mind. It's just like, oh, what? But that was the one time that I ever heard my mom cuss. But maybe I have a mild form of Tourette's, but like when I was by myself as a kid, I'd let the cuss words out.
Have you ever heard of Tourette's syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
Involuntarily shouting profanity?
It's exceptionally rare.
Shit-eating son of a bitch! Bastard! Douchebag! Twat! Numbnuts! Dickhead! Bitch!
But in public, I used to get made fun of for using euphemisms. I remember very distinctly in 7th grade, these 8th grade girls that were in the same math class as me always made fun of me for all of my stupid euphemisms I'd use. And I would never cuss. But I would cuss like in private when I was in my room. I'd let all the cuss words out. So cussing was always something that was inside me. But I repressed it. And then you go on a mission, you get married, you get leadership positions, and you don't watch rated R movies, so you end up insulating yourself from curse words. And then the arc happened exactly like Bob. Once I left the church, I got rid of the taboo. I no longer thought that I had a soul to damage, and it really felt good in certain situations to cuss. There's certain times when you have a certain emotion you want to convey when you're saying something, and the only word that seems appropriate is a good fuck.
Right.
And I embrace that and I enjoy it. I don't, obviously I have to exist in a society where not everyone sees it the way I do. And so it's not like I'm walking around saying the F word every other word, which some people listening to the podcast may have that false impression that I just go around saying fuck this, fuck that. I don't cuss a lot during the day. But when I'm talking about things I really care about, and if I feel really emotional about something, sometimes the only word that feels right is a curse word.
Yeah, and I want to get into appropriate. I don't know. I mean, what we perceive as good uses of swearing, or how we've kind of come into that. I really relate to what you were saying, Randy, about having swearing in you. I'm from a family of ranchers from rural Arizona. So like my grandpa, all growing up, he would get up and bear his testimony and swear in it. Every month he would get up in church and say, going down the highway of life, and damn, it's hard, holy hell, and he'd swear, but we were never allowed to do that. And there was this one story. I wasn't alive at this point. I hadn't been born yet, but there's this one story that my dad, who hardly ever swore, he'd sent my brothers to go out to gather like kindling for this wood burning stove that we had in our house. And he set him out like 20 minutes before, and he came out and they're still dicking around. And so he went out there and he said, "All right, you bastards, you better hurry up." And they immediately took it really seriously, right? Because he had sworn, it sent this really this powerful message, and they really hurried it up. I mean, I don't think they ever really stopped to think about what the implications of being called a bastard by your own father are. But I think a lot of why he did that, because I don't think he was thinking of my dad probably wasn't thinking about that at the time. I think that there's an unfamiliarity with swearing that it's hard to really come into a good rhythm where you can swear and sound like you know how to swear.
Well, the example that comes to my mind is the kid who's trying to be cool in high school,
right? And
hasn't really formed a nice repertoire of cussing, and actually cussing is stored in the right side of your brain in the basal ganglia in chunks. Like cussing comes in chunks, and if you haven't developed that right side of your brain where you are really proficient in cussing, and you come into a group of guys who cuss, and you're not a cusser, and you're trying to act like a cusser, you're going to come up with really lame sounding forms of cursing, and you're going to stand out like a sore thumb.
I can curse.
Oh yeah.
Penises.
Ruth.
Assing, hairy boobs, poop, farting, buttholes.
It's almost the right words, but it has a totally different feel to it, right? And it's
something off. Right.
There's something off, exactly. So, what's the problem? But the thing is, we've been going through this list of growing up Mormon and not swearing and having this conflict within us, but But I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, on what's wrong with not swearing? I mean, what's the big deal? What's the problem?
Oh, that's a good question, because a lot of non-swearing goes hand in hand with the other Mormon pastime of having lots of children. So there is, and this is a societal thing as much as it is a Mormon thing. It's just, if I guess Mormons in the aggregate maybe have an extended period of their life theoretically where they have younger people running around more than the 2.1 child average or whatever in the U.S. Right. I just bring that up because like all the siblings older than me, pretty much. So I come from a family of 6 kids, and all of them have kids, a lot of kids, and so indirectly what I'm trying to say is I don't know that there is something wrong with not swearing, especially when that's just the environment you're constantly in 24/7. I just think of my sisters, and I feel bad that I'm a swearer, for lack of a better way of describing it, when I see what they're trying to do with raising a family, and I don't know the ins and outs of how to approach swearing with kids at what age and what stage. And so that's one reason why I just abstain from swearing, independent of the fact that they're all active Mormons. That's the first reason. But then the second reason is just, wow, you're raising kids, and I don't want to be the uncle that's like forever branded as the one with the loose tongue who's got nothing else going on in his life except for that he can't control his words, So
Right.
My answer to that question is nothing. There's nothing wrong.
Wait, okay. I didn't know which question you were talking about. Okay, what is wrong with swearing? The
question you asked is, what is wrong with not swearing? There's nothing wrong with not swearing, just like there's nothing wrong with not drinking. If that's how you want to live your life, I got no problem with that. My problem comes with not understanding the difference between cruelty and profanity and what really matters. And so, like I said, you can use all the G-rated words you want and say the most hurtful thing you can to someone, and then use the most profane words that you can think of, and you're like praising the person. You're fucking awesome. You're the fucking shit, man.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to teach my kids is cruelty. Cruelty is what matters with words, not some construct of taboo. So I don't, if somebody wants to live their life free of taboo, no matter how constructed it is, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that there's something more interesting out there to explore with profanity. And, it makes for a more interesting life, but that doesn't mean I want to force that on anyone else. And, when people hear curse words that don't want to hear curse words, then I'm forcing that on them, and they're going to have a very strong emotional response in their brain. And I don't want to do that for anyone. People, there's a guy named KC. He's posts sometimes on our website. Mm-hmm. When we did our, God, Science, and Stuff episode, when I combined both blasphemy and sex in one profanity, Jesus fucking Christ, he wrote, you were very disrespectful to the listeners, and I stopped listening at that point, which is probably good because that was about the hour mark. The next hour wasn't really worth listening to. So good for you, KC. But it was fascinating to me that someone who really wasn't, a true believing Mormon got offended at something that I think is latent in his past and embedded in his brain deep in the unconscious, that he got truly offended. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's a podcast that you have to choose to listen to. And we put explicit, and Glenn gave a very strong warning at the very beginning of the podcast. It's right. Like, fuck you.
Right. But still listen, Casey, if you're out there, we love you. I love you listening. But fuck you just
KC.
A tiny bit.
I love you, KC, but you it's an important point, I think, that we shouldn't edit out. This is not something I'm going to impose in people's lives, just like I'm not going to impose drinking. And I have no problem if they want a life without it, just like without drinking. So there's nothing wrong with people that live their lives without profanity or drinking. I just want to live my life the way I want to live it.
But
And go ahead, Bob.
Well, now I want to like answer your question slightly differently, because I was all nervous and careful and thinking of my sisters and they're raising kids. But now the way Randy answered it, I want to push back a little bit, because in Mormonism, isn't there something implicitly wrong with living your life that way? Because if you're not drinking or if you're not swearing, it's not because you've in isolation made a commitment to yourself that's independent of how you think everyone else should live. It's very much because other people who are doing the opposite of what you're doing are living in sin, are on their way to hell, are, living without the Spirit. So just Mormonism doesn't allow very easily. You have to really be quite the existential Mormon to figure out a way to not want to swear and not want to drink, and then not project onto everyone around you that that's like a big fucking mistake for them to do that thing that you've decided to abstain from doing. So by definition, there's a lot of projection, a lot of judgment. It's not like you're down the street vegetarian. It's more in your face than that.
Right, they're like PETA activists, right?
But are they really? Are they really in your face about it, or is it all internal inside their own heads?
Well,
are you convicting them of thought crimes?
I guess there's a passive aggressive aspect to this as well. Like I know that certain people in my family have likely talked about me and my disaffection in certain ways and the sins that I've committed. And this is a very Mormon thing to do, is like you don't confront it head on. So I don't have a smoking gun for, a sample size of X that represents that statistically Mormons are more likely to project and hold people to a higher standard as they're sinning outside of the Mormon context. But I think we all agree that that's kind of part of believing in Mormonism. You're not an exclusive religion if you are totally cool with people living the way that you're people living a different way than you.
Yeah, I think that's true. And the idea that, the thing is, let's say that everything else fell into place and I could go back to being, and somehow I could justify to myself being, active believing Mormon. I still don't know if I could accept the idea that I'll get to heaven and I have to spend eternity never swearing again. Like, that would fucking suck. I really enjoy it because of that flavor that it has. But the thing is, okay, so I think Bob brings up an interesting tension, because on one hand, I'm kind of against people who think that you should never swear and that that no one should ever say swear words. But on the other hand, those are the people that are ladling the taboo on swear words that give them the flavor and that bite that I love so much.
Exactly.
And so it's this really crazy tension, and I don't know really how to treat it.
I'm kind of one of those people, Jake. I still have a little snobbish reaction when I hear people saying fuck too much. Like it seems like ignorance to me. That's the sentimentality that I was raised with. So that's why I'm saying I could sympathize with that position, because
it's a very 16th century point of view.
Maybe 16th century, but I'm just being honest with you guys. I still have that inside of me.
Right. And that tension is kind of what I was highlighting. I love when people say, like, oh, people swear because they can't think of a better word. Well, maybe that's because it's the best fucking word to use.
Exactly, but
maybe you could say that about people who use the word hand. Oh, they're just too stupid to think of an alternative for the word hand. Well, that's because it's a fucking hand. It's the best word to use. That's why I'm using it.
Well, Jake, there's a great South Park episode that's talking about what that illustrates what you're talking about, and it's an episode where they say shit probably 200 times in the episode.
Oh, I've heard about that.
And they have the shit counter in the bottom left-hand corner.
Shit.
And the whole point of the episode was that it was such a big deal that CBS or whatever major network finally allowed the word shit to be used. And then everyone started to use the word shit, and then eventually shit stopped being a taboo word. Because it was just so common. And so I feel the same tension that you feel. It's like, like Bob, I need these Mormons to keep these words taboo, or they won't feel as good. Does that make sense?
Right. They won't carry that same bite and that same weight. And I don't want to just shit all over Glenn because I really like that. I mean, he shared,
I was making myself fucking vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. He shared a vulnerability, and I don't want to shit all over that. I think that was valuable, and I'm glad that you said that. But at the same time, I don't really know how to navigate the two things, because I don't think that we should just open the floodgates and everybody swears all the time. But at the same time,
it's no more fun.
Right. Right.
Like, I can give you an example. When I'm listening to a comic do a comedy routine and they're using fuck over and over again and the audience is just eating it up, I have a very judgmental reaction to that. I think the comic's being lazy.
I'll give you two examples. Andrew Dice Clay, he was just not very talented in my opinion, and he would just use just the most profane words. Right. And that was his whole act.
Yeah.
And that's why Andrew Dice Clay, nobody really cares about anymore.
Yeah.
And then the extreme opposite is Jerry Seinfeld. And he's extremely funny. And he takes great pride in only once in his entire career, stand-up career, using the word fuck.
It was a Superman bit. And it was something about... how inept this newspaper would have to be, that these people, they don't even see the resemblance. These are journalists, you know. Meantime, two of them are stuck in a fucking cave every week, you know, and that was the bit. And then I said, well, let me see if it works without the word.
Right.
And I took the word out. Didn't work. And that's what bothered me.
But even he said in that instance, there was no other word to use. That was the only way that joke was going to be funny.
Yeah.
Right.
But he still takes, and he still is very clean. And then there's Louis C.K., which everybody knows is my favorite comic.
Right.
He in a roundtable discussion with Ricky Gervais, Jerry Seinfeld, and Chris Rock and Louis C.K., took umbrage with the assertion that if you use profanity, if you use the F word, then you're just taking the easy, lazy way out.
Like people say things about like comedians that curse and comedians that don't curse. If you use fuck, you're getting an easy laugh. Let's see you go get a laugh with fuck so easily.
Right.
So I think Louis C.K. is like the perfect in between Jerry Seinfeld and Andrew Dice Clay, where he doesn't just say fuck all the time just for laughs. He uses it in just the right moments where it's most funny.
By the way, I don't mind if I'm getting a laugh on something that's like, I have certain things in my act. I have laughs that I get that are, I feel like I got a laugh somewhere that nobody's gotten a laugh before. I feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
But then I get laughs where I'm like, this is a huge, broad, cheap laugh, and I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
I mean, they call it salty language, right? And I love that way of describing it, because that's what it is. It salts your communication. It adds flavor. It adds, they call it colorful language, salty language, something that could be used in measured amounts that give a dimension of expression that you just don't have access to otherwise. And that's why I really don't like the idea that nobody should swear. That's kind of going back to Bob's point. Like, I kind of am against those Mormons that, even though they're giving that taboo to the swear words, and they're giving it that weight and that bite that I like, I'm kind of against their whole worldview that nobody should swear, because you need access. If you just categorically cut off access to a certain type of expression, a certain type of verbal expression, I think that's a shame. I don't like it.
I wanted to go back to what Glenn said, because I have a kind of a different spin on it, or I don't know if iterate is the right word, but I think that there are different ways and comfort levels with swearing for me, based on the preconceived approach to swearing of the other people involved in the room. And so let's abstract. Let me explain what I'm talking about. Situation A versus situation B. What I'm trying to say is, when I have some cousins who aren't very self-aware and it's no big deal, and they swear independently of who's around and what the context is. And then I've noticed ex-Mormons are very good at making sure that they're in a safe space, or that people are generally speaking comfortable, or the environment it's a bunch of other ex-Mormons. Like, there's a part of Mormonism that's being self-aware, which is kind of ironic because I've criticized them for not being self-aware. But in this way, like knowing that you have two sides, two versions of yourself. Mormons maybe don't admit it as much when they're active, but you're always aware of who's in the room, and you always act slightly differently if the bishop's around versus your buddies. And the rest of the world, maybe it's more liberating in one sense, but I think it could also be a case of lack of self-awareness, where they think they're so hip and cool and free and open, but they're really just dicks when they're swearing around my mom in this extreme example that I made up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's kind of like I don't know. Being Mormon allows you to kind of compartmentalize your behavior in a way that you can be more easily adapted to the situation and the context that you're in. I like that idea, and I agree. I feel like it's not hard for me at all to switch off swearing.
Exactly.
When my mom's there, and then just turn it back on, and it feels totally natural to me. It doesn't. I don't have a problem at all.
I just feel like, so my roundabout way, I never actually got back to Glenn's point. I feel very uncomfortable when people who are comfortable swearing before I learned how to swear. There's something about the way that they swear, and they're not filtering or contextually being aware of what they're doing. It's just who they are. It's who they've always been. It's never been anything that they've had to work with. And so I much more prefer swearing with ex-Mormons.
Yeah, you want somebody on your same swearing level, right?
Right.
You can't. It's like an RPG, like a role playing game, right? You can't go with somebody that's like level 30 when you're 12 or whatever.
Right. And as ex-Mormons, there's like a ceiling that's generally only so high as compared to people who've been like swearing since they're 6 years old and haven't thought twice about it. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I feel like I feel like I can hold my swearing cred in a pretty diverse crowd.
But it's not about credibility. It's about your consciousness around it. It's about the self-aware nature of, you're still saying things because you choose to say them based on who's with you and what the context is. Whereas a lot of people who swear, they don't think like that at all. So you're never going to be like them.
Right. I mean, I don't. There's a lot of different ways we go down this, but I don't want to beat this horse too much. The thing I'm really curious about is, how do you approach swearing as a parent?
Well, okay, let me tell you. As I was talking earlier, my wife is listening from the other room, and she's texting me, and she said, I offered to give up swearing for Lent, and you told me you didn't want me to. What's up with that? And I texted her back and said, well, because it's cute when you swear. And she's like, I just don't get you sometimes. So, and I kind of feel like that way with the kids too, like I don't want them swearing, but when they mess up and say something like that, it's freaking hilarious. Mm-hmm. It's so dang funny. And like one of my favorite stories, I don't know if this is funny to anybody else, but so Krista's got an SUV. And so it sits high, and her girls are used to sitting high in the car. And I used to have I don't remember what it was, but just like a low sitting car. And we switched cars once. And her daughter Zoe, who was I think 4 at the time, said as they were driving, "Mom, we are ducking low." And they thought that she said we're fucking low. But she meant we're ducking, because I don't know if that even translates. But it was funny because it sounded like a 4-year-old saying a swear word, which is an incongruity, and boom, humor theory. But so I don't know. Like I hear my kids every once in a while, they'll say, "Oh my God," and I pause. I'm like, "Really? You just said, 'Oh my God'?" But we're not prudes about it. My teenage daughter, sometimes she swears, and if she starts getting excessive, I go, okay, all right, tone it down. But it's not like, okay, I'm going to wash your mouth out with soap for saying, I started listening in when Randy was talking about the taboo words in his house, and Bob, some of the words in your house, and we don't really have like established taboo words or consequences for saying them. It's just kind of, I don't know. So, probably not a good example for you there, Jake, is to parenting with swearing.
Well, I guess what I'm really getting at with that, and I think that parenting is just kind of a more extreme example of this. But what I'm really getting at is, how do you reform your morals and your sense of right and wrong when it comes to swearing? Because it was something that was categorically prohibited within the Mormon framework. And then once you come out of that framework, you kind of have to restructure that your moral compass with regards to swearing. And how exactly do you do that? Yeah. And that's kind of what I wanted to get at. I don't know if you or Bob have anything to.
Well, I don't approach it as like a moral thing.
But you do indirectly, right? Because I think it's like anything with parenting. Everyone knows who has kids that at some stage, if their kid is normal, they're gonna go through puberty, and they're gonna explore. And same goes with the first time they partake of alcohol. And with sex, it's like you're not gonna know something's uncomfortable or too much until it is. And same goes with alcohol. You're not gonna know what being drunk is like until you've been drunk. But no parent wants to assume their child's ever gonna need to be drunk. But it's going to happen. So how do you navigate these very real coming-of-age stories? And this, I don't mean to turn this into a larger parenting conversation, but I think swearing is like the most benign, mild form of it. But it's a good microcosm of this problem of, oh yeah, in our household we're pretty liberal and open-minded. Oh, except for as soon as you cross some line that I'm not willing to define and is arbitrary, even if I were to, that's excessive, and I'm going to tell you to tone it down. But you won't know until you cross it, and then, then it's hypocritical, because it's like, wait, why is it okay but not okay when you're not comfortable with it anymore? Like, how do you as a parent not be a hypocrite and have a system that makes sense, that lets kids explore but doesn't like have them out of control?
Right, and I think that's a great way of putting it. Randy, did you pick up enough of that to be able to speak to it, or?
Yeah, I guess I can just speak to it by how things go on in my household. My wife and I cuss all the time, and we have a 6 and 7-year-old, and they just somehow instinctively, and this probably won't work in every household, but they just instinctively know that what the bad words are and what they can say at school and what they can't. And my youngest actually has a real strong aversion to cussing, but he has no problem with us cussing. Like, it doesn't bother him that we cuss. But what I really actively teach is using words that are abusive. And you can use cuss words that are abusive probably are even stronger. But, like I said before, G-rated words, I could tell my kid, all these words could be put in a G-rated movie. I wish you were never born. That would be like destructive. Mm-hmm. But saying, this fucking dog shit in the house again.
But if you're going to put this on a scale, Randy, and like, I wish you were never born, compared to, I wish you were never born, you little fuck.
Ooh.
Like...
Yeah, it's worse. It's worse.
Yeah.
And, because it adds a lot more emotional emphasis. Like, it's almost like you mean it more, And that's really what cursing is all about, is it conveys an emotional power to something. But you can, so yes, if you're using cursing in an abusive way, it's probably worse than using G-rated words in an abusive way. So I'll concede that. But to me, what really is most important is avoiding abusive language, and teaching the kids that these taboo words are only taboo words because it's kind of arbitrary. It's very arbitrary, depending on the culture.
Although I would say that fuck is onomatopoetically, objectively, a powerful word.
And harsh.
Yeah. Right? You got that nice F, you can really dig in there, and then, God, just that karate chop, that CK is like is like a punch to the temple.
Yeah, but just substitute P for F, and it's, you're talking about hockey. Puck!
Right.
And all of a sudden, you don't have that emotional response from the listener.
Right, and that kind of goes to that goes directly to the neurology of swearing that you were talking about before, where swear words are stored in the amygdala. They're stored in like the emotional center of the brain, whereas other words
they're actually not stored in the amygdala. The amygdala is what is fired by the listener who does not like cursing, and that's why that's why, in my opinion, it's an unkind thing to do, to use this kind of language to people whose amygdala will be fired. The cursing is stored in the basal ganglia on the right lobe of the brain, and it has connections both in the the limbic system as well as the outer cortex, which is the higher thinking center. And so, like all language has two things. And Glenn, you probably did a linguistics course, right?
Some, yeah, but
So
not to this degree.
Okay, so you have an annotation and a connotation to every word. The annotation is the meaning of the word, and that comes mainly from the left side of your brain, which is mostly in charge of language. The connotation comes from the limbic system, which is the emotional, like what is really conveyed, the emotional response that is conveyed by the word that you're using. And so it's really pretty complicated. I'm not going to get into all the details, mainly because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But like curse words tap into both the connotation and the annotation. And then, like I said before, the listener has the amygdala response, the emotional response, when it's a word that is taboo to them, and it has a real strong impact on them.
I want to go back. I feel like we glossed over Randy and his wife swearing around their little kids. I have a little more to double click on there. One of the stigmas that usually goes hand in hand with parenting, and Glenn, feel free to chime in on this as well, is you don't want your kids embarrassing you. I mean, many a bad comedy has this premise at some point where, the kid says a bad word in front of the uncles and aunts that are around, and they're like, "Where did you hear that?" "Oh, Daddy says it all the time." Wah wah wah. But it rings true because that's the true nature of adults swearing, but then trying to teach their kids that it's a bad word. So in this new model of swearing all the time, either Randy is super comfortable with the fact that everyone that his little kids associate with that are still active Mormons, as they do family get-togethers, that there's, I don't know if it's an added risk or maybe it's not any more of a risk, but you're opening yourself up a bit more than following the stereotype and prohibiting that from maybe happening if you were following a more traditional model of like strictly enforcing that these are very bad words. Or
well, the reality of the situation is they're going to hear these words at school.
Right, but they're not. But they're going to hear them from people at school, not from you. And so,
yeah, well, and slip-ups have happened. Lincoln, when he was like 5 years old, in front of my believing dad and believing stepmom, said, "What the hell?" And it was kind of an embarrassing moment for a moment, at the time. But at the same time, I was also glad that I could show that my kid is a good kid, even though he used the word hell. So, I mean, that's kind of how I spun it anyway.
Okay, so you still have that instinctive, like, fear-based way of not wanting that to happen, but you're not letting that get in the way of your new.
Well, why do I fear it? Why do I fear it? It's
because
it's the way my dad's going to respond, or the way my stepmom's going to respond.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
If he had done that in front of friends, like if he'd done that in front of Glenn's sister, it would have been funny, because he didn't mean it in a mean way. He was just like, "What just happened? What the hell?"
But it would only be sort of funny if he did it in front of not only Glenn's sister but Glenn's sister's kids, because kids usually hang out with kids when there are adults around. So like that complicates it further.
They would all chime in. Then it would be you'd be letting loose all the like light blue language.
Yeah, but the thing is, the reason that that's funny is because, first of all, you don't expect it, and it's a taboo on a taboo.
Right.
Like there's a child, you're saying a taboo word, you're saying a swear word, but the fact that a child is saying it is another layer of taboo. So we're already kind of implicitly accepting this idea that children shouldn't swear. Is that something that we're accepting or not?
No,
No.
And as I think about it, there's definitely times when our kids will say something and we'll say, "Hey, you don't say that," and try to teach them not to say that. And so I'll have to start paying more attention to what we're doing there.
But how do you teach kids? Don't say this when it's gonna be with other people who associate a different meaning. I mean, it gets very lost in translation. Or do they understand these nuances? Because the way I view it is that if I have a child and my child swears in front of my sister's child, it's my fault because my child wasn't taught the right way. That I would never swear in front of my sister's child because I know that would be damaging to her and what she's trying to accomplish with her kids, and I believe in not projecting myself in damaging ways towards people when I know very clearly how to avoid it. But if I have a child and at home I'm like, loosey goosey, fuck, shit, bastard, this, that, and the other, and then my kid does it around her kid, it's untenable. Like, how do I manage that? I can't have it both ways.
Well, if you have a normal kid, they know how to survive in their environment, and they will if they're normal kids. And I have a very abnormal 16-year-old, so I got both extremes in my household. So I understand having an abnormal kid and two normal kids. But they just instinctively know that if they say that, they're going to get in trouble. If they say that in front of adults,
right.
Like it doesn't matter if they say it in front of
especially if it's
their
in front of
peers.
mom and dad. If like mom and dad have raised this several times and said you don't say that, you don't say that, then they learn. Okay, I don't say that in front of mom and dad. Now they might say it other places where they can get away with it, and so to your point, Bob, how do you control and manage that? I don't know.
But doesn't that go?
Can.
Yeah,
I know how you can. Tell them that there's somebody up in heaven watching them, and that they don't like it.
So now you're metaphysicalizing
or in the North
words,
Pole, or in the North Pole.
Right. Okay.
My whole goal is to get the kids to understand words are words, but you can use words in ways that are cruel, and you can use words in ways that aren't cruel, and it really doesn't matter whether they're taboo or not. And it's they're not going to understand it at that level at 6 and 7. But I think that they're, in my experience, the 6 and 7-year-old boys, they get it. Like they get that, and it only happened once. They've never cussed in front of, and they never used like the major cuss words. I can't even, if I wanted to, I couldn't get my 6 and 7-year-old to say fuck. They will not say it.
That's a good problem to have.
What if you do like a swear jar where every time they say it, you give them a quarter?
But that still only solves half the problem.
No, I was making a joke, Bob.
Well, okay, but whatever you do to try to solve a kid from not swearing, the problem is if you're the one swearing all the time, that's like hypocritical parenting, which is like old school parenting, 20th century.
No, it's not hypocritical because I put the same standard on myself. I don't.
But you don't. You're swearing all the time.
I don't walk around the clinic floor with my patients and going, "Ah, fuck! You got to fucking brush your teeth, you little shit."
Right,
but your kids don't know that.
Kids don't see that. But
Yes,
but
they
Bob, if
do.
the rule is kids don't talk like this, but adults can, then you're not being a hypocrite because you're an adult. You're not a kid.
No, but that's bullshit. I remember my parents doing that with movies all the time. With they're like, "Close your eyes during this scene." Like, why the fuck are you watching it?
Yeah, because we're an adults. We do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, but
you need to close your eyes.
But Bob, I have sat my kids down and told them that, and they know what the bad words are, and I tell them you cannot say these things in front of your teacher, or you're just going to get in trouble. Like, it's not important to mom and dad whether or not you say these things, as long as you're not using them in a cruel way.
Okay, here we go.
But if you use these in front of other people, they don't have the same ideas about these things that we do. And grandma and grandpa definitely don't have the same ideas that mom and dad have. So you can't say this in front of them. So he slipped up once and used a very mild cuss word, but he has never since, ever, slipped up.
But did he ask? Was he inquisitive and was like, well, why are we so different? I'm just curious if it went that far, or if he was like shoulder shrug, okay, sounds good. Like it's a kid, so I don't know.
He's a kid, so he wasn't going, oh, why is this, Dad?
What is the nature of the universe?
The social context of this. Can you contextualize
I just don't.
this?
I don't like what Glenn was talking about earlier. It just sounds like, and I don't mean to claim this is the way you parent, because that's not what I'm saying, but just the because I told you so lazy parenting, like, oh, kids get away with it, can only do this, parents do this, you'll understand when you're older. I hated that, and I always promised myself I would never do that. It's easy for me to say not actually having any kids.
Well,
so
Bob, but
it
can extend to the most mundane things. Like, why is it okay for mom and dad to eat in the living room while they're watching TV, but not the kids? Well, because the kids are going to make a mess. The adults aren't. So you could say, all right, we're going to level the playing field, and nobody eats in the family room, but then I don't get to. And that's not cool.
That's not cool at all.
Why do I have to go to bed at 8? Because the parents stay up and they watch movies until 10:30. Why can't I do that? Well, because you're a kid. There's all kinds of things like that when you're parenting.
Right. And I think that's a good point, and that kind of gets back to what bothers me about parenting. That's why I had a kid. I got rid of him though. I'm just kidding. I never had a child.
He's still here in Bloomington. He doesn't even know you guys left.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So but the thing that bothers me about the Mormon stance on the way that Mormonism interprets the movies you should watch and the music you should listen to and the language you should use is it imposes that level playing field on everybody. So basically we're all living the lifestyle of 12-year-olds, except for, or of like an 8-year-old, of like a 5th grader, right? We watch the same level of edgy movies that a 5th grader would watch. We use the same level of language that a 5th grader would use, except for parents who get to have sex. Like there's this weird like incongruity where you get naked and bump uglies, but you don't use cuss words. And so like the thing is, I don't like that idea. And so I really like what Glenn is saying about differentiating. This is adult behavior. Like, sure, children shouldn't watch R-rated movies. Maybe a 6-year-old shouldn't watch Saving Private Ryan because it's an adult movie.
Shaving Private Ryan?
Shaving Private Ryan?
A special channel that you're watching, Jake?
Porn.
No, that's
Freudian slip.
No, that's Shaving Ryan's Privates.
Right, okay.
That's definitely
different.
porn.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, Saving Private Ryan, I mean, they shouldn't watch it because it's a movie for adults. But that doesn't mean adults can't watch it. That doesn't mean that nobody should watch a movie that has, intense violence or, or it has an explicit sex scene or something in it.
That's not what the prophet says.
But that's why Mormonism is that's why it's so stupid. It's infantilizing everybody. I mean, but I mean, on a practical level, yeah, because I mean, sure, the Book of Abraham, like all that shit's out there, and it's weird and it's easily falsifiable. But this is where the rubber meets the road. You live like a 10-year-old.
Well, because
and that's what sucks.
The scriptures tell you that you have to become like a little child because of such is the kingdom of heaven. Booyah.
Yeah, but just to back up what Jake's saying is this infantilizing of the adults in the Mormon Church prohibits them from exploring the great art that's out there, because the great art that's out there explores all of humanity and all its ugliness, and just exploring those areas is a very enlightening exercise. But no, everything's got to be approved and appropriate.
Right. It is. I always did find it a little ironic that the story we have for the war in heaven was Satan was going to give all these, controls so that people don't wander into sin and everything like that. That's kind of what the church does in certain ways. To your point, Randy, that you're not supposed to go in and experience the awful things in life, and the rules of the church keep you from doing that. But it seems.
But isn't the reality that there's a healthy tension, like, because both extremes aren't good. So on the one hand, okay, so kids and adults are different, and that's fine, and that can be an excuse. And on the other hand, kids, Mormon style, shouldn't level the playing field to where adults have to be, handicapped at their level their whole life. But I still feel like that shouldn't justify keeping kids as kids for longer than necessary. And I know it's easy for me to say on my high horse, but what I'm trying to say is, like, I've heard of like a line of parenting that tries to treat kids with respect and as close to adults as possible, rather than reverting to it's convenient to treat them as a kid and just tell them to do things because I said so, because it's easier and lazier and faster and quicker and more convenient. But there is a line where it crosses over into some form of hypocrisy if you just go too far with that, and you know, and then arbitrarily your kid turns 18 and it's the first time they've ever seen an R-rated movie or experienced, I don't know what, you know, a swear word. So I guess it's navigating those waters. There's some gray area there, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think we're getting really hung up on like the specific rules because we're Mormons, and you know, we're deep down, we're just obsessed with rules and like some sort of algorithm you can
give me a white handbook. Yeah,
right, exactly. Some sort of algorithm you can crunch any situation into and then spit out the right answer. But the thing is, like, we really need to start moving away from, you know, like the commandments and mandates and start looking at like the underlying principles. And I think that's what Randy was talking about, is like being cruel. That's a principle. Not using cuss words is a rule. And you kind of need to differentiate between the two. And you need to, if you orient yourself toward principles, I think that's kind of what that allows you to have the nuance and have that nuance and not be a hypocrite.
Right, and principles normally don't have like a differentiator between how you're allowed to use, how you're allowed to live based on if you're a child or an adult. It's not like, right, oh, when you're an adult you can be cruel. It's like, no, you shouldn't be cruel regardless. And same goes with like eating in the living room. The principle is don't make a mess, and there's a higher probability that you're going to make a mess as a kid. You're not going to appreciate or understand that that's true because you're going to think that you're fine. But I've been through this with other kids, and it's not that way. And you'll feel sorry, but I'm just going to prevent it from happening. So there's going to be an incongruity there based on past experience or blah blah blah. So
right.
Well, speaking of principles, I'm going to take us on a tangent. We'll see how far it goes.
Because we were on the straight and narrow before.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Totally. What is it with, and this extends both in American culture with the FCC, is it the FCC? And also with fundamentalist religions and with Mormonism, where they are so comfortable with violence, but so offended by sex. Like, you cannot say on TV, you know, me and this girl, we fucked. But, man, you could blow her head off right on network television, prime time.
And did you? I didn't hear if you guys talked about this or not, but that tension that exists as a believing Mormon, when you know there's a movie out there like The King's Speech that would be really great to see, but, oh, man, it's got those F words in it, and I just don't know if I can stomach it.
Yeah, the only rated R movie my mom ever watched in her entire life, and she allowed all of us to watch it.
Shawshank Redemption.
No, Schindler's List.
Oh my gosh, that's a hardcore one.
Yes, and the only reason she was okay with it is she had heard, yes, there's a lot of violence and horror.
And there's nudity.
With the Holocaust. The nudity's not really sexual. I mean,
it doesn't matter, man.
To get gassed.
As Mormons, nudity is just weird no matter how non-sexual it is. I'm surprised. That's like a big...
Well, she was told that there was no cussing and that there was no sex, but there is violence. And that was the one... And the whole message, of course, is this guy that gave up all of his wealth to save not save souls, but to save lives. And that was the only movie that only radar movie my mom watched.
Everybody has that story, though. There's like, it's Shawshank Redemption for one group of friends. It's Last of the Mohicans for another. Like, everyone has like the one rated R movie where they're like, but this one is the example of how the system broke down. And it's like, you realize like every third movie is that way, right? Like,
yeah. Right. Well, this is the ridiculousness of it. This is the ridiculousness of basing your morality around rules rather than principles. That's what the MPAA is, and that's what Mormonism does. And so that's why it seems so arbitrary and made and stupid, is because it's based around all these rules. You keep making all these rules to create your morality, but there's no clear underlying principles that really guide the whole thing. And so then, you don't drink coffee, but then somehow caffeinated drinks are okay, and we don't really know why you don't drink coffee.
The thing that enters in when you're talking about rules is it's arbitrary. It depends on the person who's making the rules. It's completely arbitrary. But principles are more universal.
Okay, well, Here's I want to kind of divert a little bit. Can we talk a little bit about the use of swearing substitutes, and what do you guys think about that? Because personally, I like having them in my little quiver of words, because I feel like there are some times when they are more appropriate and they carry a certain flavor that I wouldn't be able to get with a full-on swear word. I also like bleeping too. Like in Arrested Development, I really like when they bleep cuss words because it's used in a comedic way, and I feel like it adds to it rather than the omission, and the bleeping adds to the comedy in a way that having the actual word there may not.
I think it stems from it's funny that we have to bleep it, and that makes it more funny because we know that they act. When you watch the Daily Show or the Colbert Report,
right?
It's really I agree with you, Jake. I think it's funny that they bleep it out, but I think it comes from a place that it's funny that they have to bleep it out.
Right.
Whereas euphemisms, when you have people hooked up to an fMRI, and you have them use euphemisms, and then you have them use curse words, the actual taboo words. There's a big difference in what goes on in your brain when you're using euphemisms versus taboo words. And certain studies have actually had practical applications of this, that if you are allowed to use taboo words, you can withstand pain twice as long as when you're only allowed to use euphemisms. But the funny thing is, and I sent this article to all of you guys, is that if you're a person who cusses like a sailor or swears like a sailor, that effect wears off. And using cuss words in a cathartic way or a way to deal with the pain wears off. It goes away, and it's completely negligible. So there's a difference in your brain between euphemisms and taboo words, and I think that's why it's so attractive to us. Once we get rid of the metaphysics of taboo words, that leads to the attractiveness of using taboo words.
But then, by that same logic, wouldn't it diminish the value because now I'm not, risking a kingdom of glory for all eternity by my use of stupid words? And so
in our culture, they're still taboo. It doesn't matter if you're in a Mormon chapel or if you're in your office, you still can't use those taboo words.
I don't know. I feel like maybe we're an anomaly use case or something, but I like using replacements, especially around siblings sometimes, depending on their activity level in the church. I'll say I can't freaking believe blah, blah, blah or whatever. And then, somebody else might say, I can't fucking believe this. And to me, it's a good replacement and it serves its purpose and it's a good compromise or middle ground. And I don't feel like I'm, at some brainwave level, I'm experiencing it in a half-assed way compared to the true nature of using the swear word in that moment. I'm just filtering for reasons that make sense given the context and the relationships I have.
Yeah, it depends. It all depends. It's all dependent on your audience, Bob.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that they can also be really well used in a humorous context for creating that incongruity theory. So if you say, get your fucking act together, you dang old dummy. That's there's kind of a funny there's a funny undertone to that.
That's juxtaposition.
Right.
I sometimes feel more comfortable saying fricking than fucking. And it doesn't matter what audience there is or not. It's me. I just feel more comfortable with it. So I don't think it's all just about audience.
Okay, so I'm still obsessed with rules, even though I've talked about this whole rules versus principle thing. And so I want to have some kind of takeaway, because I'm doing this as a response to people in the listener feedback saying that they're uncomfortable with the swearing that comes out in the podcast. And I kind of want to have some sort of idea, some sort of advice for them. Just say, for our listeners that are uncomfortable with swearing, that's fine if you're uncomfortable with swearing, but
ask yourself why.
Right. Okay. All right. See, I want you guys to kind of fill in the blank there.
But asking yourself why, I mean, is implying that they need to change. That there's something fundamentally wrong with their comfort level with swearing, and they're not quite as advanced as you are.
Well, that's a very cynical take on what I asked.
Yeah, but I think it's true.
I don't know.
I'm saying ask yourself why, and maybe this isn't the podcast for you, but ask yourself why, and maybe you might be able to explore what it is about taboo words that bothers you. Is it that there's some kind of metaphysical link to them that damages your soul? Is it conditioning like Glenn has experienced throughout his childhood that he can't, at least...
it's unnatural for me. Like every time I say it, like it doesn't flow. Like I have to force myself to like even now. Get the fuck out. It gets stuck.
Yeah,
and so I still have that filter.
I think there's an aspect of personality type as well.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hurt to ever, for all of us, ask. Like I need to ask myself why I like to cuss so much, and then I might come to some interesting conclusions about myself. So it's not like the cynical take, like why can't you be as cool as me or as enlightened as me, and just use taboo words all the time. If it doesn't feel natural to you, then well, I'm not saying you have to use it.
Let me tell you, Randy, one of the reasons why I went that cynical route is because when this has come up, you've talked about how there's so much value in the brain because you can hook people up to machines that show that when you say a good fuck, it just feels better. And I haven't seen those studies. I don't know. I'm probably not even curious to look at them. But I just wonder if that's true for everybody. If you've got somebody who has like an internal filter like I do, what would my study show? What would
you
my
would be one? You would be one subject among many, and they take the average. And so, it's like any study that comes to a conclusion is only saying this is generally true, but that doesn't mean it's true for everyone.
Yeah, but I'll embrace the cynicism if Randy won't. So here's why I think it's a good question. Ask yourself why. There's so many things in this world. There's people hurt each other in very real ways, and language can be one of those ways. But I think part of what we tried to do earlier was parse out when it's really hurtful and when it isn't, and it's not a 1-to-1 ratio with how bad the word is that your church says you shouldn't say. And for that reason, there's a good. If you do this a Venn diagram, you're gonna notice a very small overlap between hurting people and bad words. They're not necessarily as overlapping as we've all been grown up to believe. And once you parse that out, then maybe bad words aren't going to have as much.
This is the sticks and stones rule,
I guess. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to hurt
very
other
simplistic
people.
Summation.
Yeah. Well, but basically you're saying that words aren't harmful. There's real things in the world that are harmful.
Words can be harmful. We're saying taboo words don't all fall into the same circle,
right?
As hurtful words. Words that sticks and stones may hurt, may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's bullshit. Like there are lots of words that are, if I tell my wife, I don't love you anymore, or I never loved you, and I'm stuck with you, and I haven't used any profanity. Those words are hurtful. That would crush her. It would crush me if she said the same thing to me. So words can hurt people in very profound ways, but using taboo words in and of itself does not necessarily mean that you're hurting people.
Right. Like, for instance, if I look over to my wife when I'm watching a funny thing happen and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, can you believe that guy? That's hilarious. That's not hurtful. It doesn't mean anything that you need to take offense at. And she doesn't she doesn't have issues with language in that way anyway, because she didn't grow up Mormon, and it's not her first language. That's a separate thing. But that's what we're talking about when we're asking the question, why does it hurt you? Or why are you offended intrinsically? It doesn't need to be that way. There are real things happening in the world that you should channel your energy towards in terms of being offended. And some of these use cases of bad words is,
so let
But the thing is,
wait, hold on. I want to ask Glenn a question. Just because you don't like using curse words, are you offended by them?
No.
So
I've become very accustomed to hearing them and even thinking them sometimes. It's just like they're difficult for me to articulate.
So my question to any listeners who or I guess my statement to any listeners who are offended by our cursing is, I'm not asking you to use these words, but why? Ask yourself why.
Why can't you be
using
more like
these
Glenn?
using these words in innocuous ways, where I'm not like attacking the listener. Why? Why do you think that offends you so?
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree with that, but with one caveat, and the caveat with that is the fact that I can say that when I say Jesus fucking Christ, can you believe that guy? That it's not hurting anybody, and that's true. I'm not using it in an abusive or an aggressive way, but I am benefiting from the fact that somebody would be hurt by that, because that's what the definition of a taboo word is. The taboo word is a word that would offend and would damage somebody's sensibilities. And so I'm benefiting from kind of the abstract person that would be offended by that, but I can still kind of claim that I'm not trying to hurt anybody directly. And so I feel like I'm trying to have it both ways, but I do agree with what you're saying. Does that make sense?
So you're sensitive of the audience, right? But all of us that like to cuss need those people abstractly to be offended, or it's no fun anymore.
Right. And so that's the tension. I love that like it's final that is like a final point.
And I like that you said having it both ways, and you talked about sensibilities, because as soon as you said sensibility, I thought the sensibility that's being damaged is the sensitivity to language. Like that, I mean, it's not a real sensibility. It's not real harm. It's just that sensitivity to language is the only thing that's really being damaged by hearing it.
Right.
Which is pretty arbitrary.
And pretty opposite of other things that I've said. So like trying to have it both ways kind of thing. So I don't know.
Right. I think it's a hard and kind of mushy thing. I think we all need to exist in tension, and that tension has to exist in order for any of the benefits of swearing to exist. But yet at the same time, the tension kind of is what keeps us from being able to use those words in the first place. And so it's like we're in this kind of eternal loop of being mildly offended and just internally kind of condescending toward the other people. And and it has to be that way.
Yeah,
and it's weird.
It almost makes it like our asking the question to the listener is even more super special, because it's like, come join us. We know that other group is going to exist no matter what anyway, and we're extending you a one-time offer. Call now, and you can jump over to our side, and don't worry about the other side.
1-800 fuck you.
Yo, here's another little piece of advice. You take some fuck, then some shit, then some fuck, then some shit. You got a fuck shit stack. A fuck shit stack. Take some fuck, then some shit, then some fuck, then some shit. You got a fuck shit stack. A fuck shit stack. It's a stack.
Hi, this is Matthew Vernon, recording from Whitingham, Vermont, the birthplace of Brigham Young, a man of superb equipment. Seriously, just Google his birthplace marker and you can see for yourself. Or you can comment on this episode on the website infantsonthrones.com. And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes. I did. Anyone for the closing prayer?
Never be able to be like me. Fuck shit. Fuck shit. Fuck shit. Fuck shit. Fuck shit. Fuck on top of himself, nigga. Fuck shit. Fuck shit. Fuck shit. Fuck shit.